So, I haven't looked into this kind of stuff in a while, but there's been some weird happenings around the world lately. For example, the potential that the human species may have been around a lot longer than we initially thought, based on these monolithic structures that we previously suspected to be about 4,000 years old, are now suspected to be a lot older. Ancient civilizations talking about groups of men that came to their countries and brought civilization, astronomy, and agriculture, and lately all these world mysteries have been occupying a lot of my time. So there I was over at a friend's house, just hanging out, having myself a good day, when my friend looks over at me and says, "I gotta show you this video, dude, you're not gonna believe this." Now maybe you've seen this video before, and if you have, you probably know what this video is gonna be about. Normally I don't touch these kinds of strange videos, but I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, and those that do take the situation a bit too far. So I wanted to watch through this with you guys today and see what the hell might be going on with this ceremony. Now first things first, let's talk about what this actually is. In 2016 Switzerland, the world's largest and deepest tunnel was built, spanning 35.4 miles and 1.4 miles deep. There was a lot of hype around this tunnel, being as it passes through the Swiss Alps and makes the journey from Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and France a lot quicker. The strange part about this tunnel was the opening ceremony, which didn't take too long as I was watching it to realize that this was a bit weird. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire ceremonies, that would take over an hour, but I have a few bullet points and spots in the videos that I'd like to discuss, and if you're curious, I'll leave the links to the full thing in the description and you can make your own judgments on this. So first things first, this ceremony was put on in Switzerland for the opening of the tunnel. World leaders from all over Europe, mostly leaders from Germany, France, and Italy were invited, which makes sense being as that's who this tunnel would affect most, but it also seemed to spook a lot of people and I can kinda understand why once it gets going. One thing to note, before the ceremony began, the tunnel was blessed by a priest, and then right after that, this satanic display arose. So the first thing we have here is a large group of people walking into the center of the tunnel almost like they're dazed or under the control of the music. The way they walk has been likened to a zombified state by pretty much anyone who did touch on this video. Now, the first part of this isn't so bad. Just a choreographed dance put on by people dressed up as construction workers. Sure, the music's a bit dark, but overall nothing too weird yet. At about 5 minutes in, the construction workers become a bit manic, like they don't know what they're doing. And then right after that, this last train car brings in a group of people who are dressed in more revealing clothing, and accompanying them is what most have identified as a fallen angel. Which is apparently an angel that disobeyed God and became corrupt. I know this seems like a bit of a stretch, but once the ceremony really gets going, there's absolutely no confusion here on this. There's even a scene in here that may even be an imagining of the fallen angel corrupting people. After this, another card is rolled in with what people refer to as demonic creatures, and then with them is a goat man, who typically represents Satan in ancient scribbles. As I was watching through this with my friend, the thoughts in my head were, all of this for a tunnel? But don't worry, it gets a lot stranger than this. At around 14 minutes, we see this goat is being worshipped, and people are bringing him offerings of trees, which I guess are upside down trees? Now I never knew this, but apparently this symbolizes an upside down cross, or the tree of death, which really does fit the theme here. When I was watching this part and thinking about it artistically, I imagined that maybe this was supposed to be some depiction of hell or a dark world or something like that. Right after that, though, this man gets on a stage and sings in gibberish, and he even speaks in gibberish. It's kind of like he's calling for Satan, and Satan does respond. Right after that, the man who is singing sits down and watches everyone around him start celebrating, possibly celebrating the arrival of Satan? There are a few who speculate that the red lights in here are supposed to represent a blood sacrifice, but that's not really clear to me, at least until they take the severed head of a woman and lift it above the dancers. The silk that falls from her head seems to represent that she was decapitated, as though it's blood. The severed head is then put on a body of a woman, and the first train makes its way through the tunnel. Now, if that was it, fine. It's freaking strange, but the next half of this display actually takes place outside. This is the part that was kind of odd to me. I mean, fine, you made art, cool, but to sit everyone down inside the tunnel, and then put on half of the performance, and then to have everyone move outside to complete it? I mean, that's just a lot of effort over a tunnel opening ceremony, right? I mean, most of these things are as simple as cutting a ribbon, crowd cheers, and now the tunnel's open and everyone can go on about their day, but whatever, let's move on to the second part. Okay, so here we are in part 2. Everyone's gone outside, and we start off again with a large group of construction workers walking in a daze, as though again they're being controlled by the music. They make their way up to this platform where a giant screen sits, and once they get up there, the workers start climbing up the wall and removing rock to form this tunnel. Now, there were a few videos I saw where they were speculating that this was the rock of Christ, but I didn't really catch the evidence for that. I'm just not sure the symbolism was there to make a claim like that. Honestly, it's part 2 that gets really weird. Instead of opening a tunnel, they seem to open up a portal, and they perform this ritualistic dance in order to open it up. One thing a few people noted was as the tunnel opened up, the workers started removing their clothes, which could symbolize a corruption of their minds. Like right and wrong doesn't exist the more they open this portal, which does seem to happen. As the tunnel opens, eventually people dress similarly to how they did when they were in the hellish realm from part 1. Eventually the music takes over again, and the people seem hypnotized and controlled, but after this is where things get really interesting. It looks like some sort of voluntary human sacrifice happens. These 3 men climb up into the tunnel and hang themselves until they're dead, and then there's this animation on the screen of the 3 workers being hurled down the tunnel as these giant demonic hands grab at them. Did I mention too that the music is really setting the tone for all this as well? It just kind of blew me away how organized all this was. It's at this point that the 3 men who sacrifice themselves turn into 3 spirits and float above the scene with an all-seeing eye, and a group of followers underneath who grab their long horns and start playing. And right after this, Satan returns. And at this point, it kind of makes sense why the first half of this performance was inside. It could have been a metaphor for Satan leaving his world and entering ours, which... what the hell? This whole show is just straight up weird. This isn't some sideshow. This was the opening ceremony for a train tunnel. right after Satan comes, you have these demonic creatures again, and those 3 men who turned into 3 ghosts now seem to have reincarnated into 3 scarabs. Maybe they were all never the same thing, but the number 3 shows up a lot in this video. The goat man, who we suspect is Satan, then proceeds to have sex with a fallen angel or a woman of some sort, and then for a while it's nothing but chaos. Now, this we saw before with the man in the tunnel singing for Satan. Now we have a woman singing for Satan, and his new followers are bringing upside down trees as offerings again. I honestly don't know what to make of this next part. Perhaps it symbolizes materialism or the arrival of a new world Satan made. Perhaps it's demonstrating a distancing from living harmoniously with nature. It's kind of really up to your own interpretation, honestly. What seems to be Satan's bride enters the stage with a pregnant belly and another young goat-headed man, and this kind of becomes a mess of chaotic representation of a modern world. They even put political heads in suits and walk them down the aisle that Satan was on. And at the end, we have a happy little melody. People are singing and rejoicing over the new tunnel. One thing that caught my eye was time spinning out of control. This whole ceremony reminds me of what I read from Roman celebrations or depictions of ancient civilizations that predicted the future to be an evil, materialistically driven, chaotic one, where people will lose touch with themselves so much that they can no longer think for themselves and are led by evil without even realizing it had taken them. Then, just like nothing happened, at the very end, everyone's happy and celebrates the tunnel and goes home.